A very important part of a relationship is the emotional connection and caring about each other. And to answer the question of some of you is like, okay, I had a really good husband in many respects. He was not an alcoholic. He didn't hit me. He came home every night. He was the breadwinner. He fixed things around the house. He kept his word. He exercised. So why would I leave him? Because he was emotionally walled off. And it's not his fault because he was raised that way, and many people were raised that way. I write about my experience in my marriage in my book, What I Did for Sex. Look behind me, what a beautiful evening it is. I'm feeling the breeze blowing in from the ocean. And it's actually very sad because he was raised, and many people are, especially men of that time, but even women, but especially men, were shamed for having feelings. They weren't allowed to cry, and so they shut off their feelings. Under the traditional old patriarchy, a lot of people went through their relationships walled off. They didn't talk about things, they swept things under the rug. And women who were upset said nothing. They thought, my job is to say nothing, my job is to be pleasing. But see, what happens when you are walled off, you don't even know how you feel. You're just numb to your feelings. See, if I were to say, I coach people, when I ask people how they feel and I ask them where they feel it in their body, usually the people that come to me, they know where they feel it in their body. But occasionally I come across someone who says, I don't feel it in my body, or I don't even know what I feel, or I don't feel it in my body, because it was never modeled to them or beat out of them as children. When people are emotionally walled off, they're not able to share how they feel. They're not able to tell you when they're angry, but it comes out in passive aggressive ways. They're afraid of intimacy and connection because it scares them. In my ex-husband's case, he grew up in a family where you don't talk about feelings and you don't show anger. Anger was never shown. He never saw his parents fight. And so it's very important. A normal relationship goes through harmony, disharmony, and repair. Every relationship. If you never argue, it's because you're in the first few years you might not. But after that, you're going to have disagreements. You're going to have your feelings hurt. And if you don't know how to repair, it's easy to stay in disharmony, which can show up as being silently resentful, being critical, trying to change your partner, raging, shutting down, retreating into your corner. And I guess he would, I couldn't understand. For years, I kept just, I kind of did my own thing. We had kind of like a parallel relationship where we each had our own roles, and I learned to not look to him for anything. And when it came to sex, he treated me like a microwave. He just rolled over in the morning, stuck it in. By the way, to the guy who said young women don't need Astroglide, I needed Astroglide. I don't need it now. I'm 60, but I needed it then because he didn't know how to turn me on. I kept KY jelly in the dresser. And I even went to see the therapist. I'm like, what happened to my sex drive? I was still masturbating, but I didn't like sex with him. And that's when I realized it was really about our relationship. But he didn't give a shit. And that's what is in the book. And I wasn't nagging. I would say things like, hey, you should read the book. Hey, I would love for you to go to this parenting class with me. Or I would love to do this Tantra class. Or let's go to dinner. It would just be no, 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 no. He didn't see his parents argue. But some of you may have seen your parents argue and decide you will never argue. So you're afraid to bring anything up. You're afraid to let your partner know when you're upset and you just keep it in. And also, people didn't really speak of their affection. And they didn't really feel loved. He grew up, they were all kind of like English ancestry, Norwegian ancestry, hardworking, work. You see a lot of East Coast people that way too. And you're maybe Chinese people, you're supposed to just work and you're not supposed to have feelings. And so it's not modeled to you, and the parents are very busy. So the way you show love to people is by doing things for them. So you just stay silently resentful. And that is ultimately, you know what? I was okay with it for a long time, but when I decided later on in my life, when I had grown a lot, and I was no longer okay with it, and I looked for closeness from him, and I got more closeness, became very painful. I felt angry, I felt painful, and I felt so confused. And I didn't feel rejected because I knew he loved me, but I'm like, if you love me, why are you treating me this way? I couldn't figure it out. I finally figured it out years after my divorce, is that he was emotionally avoidant, walled off in that quadrant, walled off, which is too many boundaries, and grandiose, not a healthy self-esteem, and he didn't give a shit. But honestly, I think it's because it scared him. And that's why a lot of people don't want to do therapy or coaching. It scares people to look at their stuff. Ultimately, though, I can also look at it in another way, is that, sometimes whether we have a soul contract or we have a karma with someone, it was lived out. I had I got a chance to be a stay-at-home mom. He was a good father, and I got the chance. We have really 3 wonderful children who grew up very functional in the world. And it's because of him. I attribute a lot of that to him. I also got to leave him and make a whole new life for myself, which I would have never had. I would never have this channel. One of the things I wrote about in my book was my Vicodin addiction. And when I stopped taking Vicodin, I wanted to make videos about it, but I couldn't because I didn't feel like I could speak of him and me when he was so private. I didn't want to embarrass him. Now I can say whatever I want. I changed my last name when my book came out because he didn't want his last name on my book. And now I can say whatever I want. No one's trapping me. No one's telling me, Sharzat, you can't speak of this, you can't speak of that. Not my dad. I didn't take my maiden name. He didn't want his last name on my book either. So I'm like, good, I'm free. I'm totally free. I didn't even know I could make my own money. I left my husband, and I didn't know how I would support myself. And he was very nice. He paid off a lot of things that I had and made it possible for me to leave him. He's always been nice that way. And so I got to exercise all these new parts of myself. I make more money now than I had when I was with him. I have money from my personal trainers. I got to write this book. I got to be an escort and a stripper in my 50s. All these experiences I would have never had if I'd been with him. I got to start a life coaching business. I would have never done any of that if I were with him. I wouldn't have. We just started wanting different things out of a relationship. And so it was a blessing. Like our soul contract was over and this is the next phase of my life. I think I tried everything I could to make it work. And so in order for me to keep growing and to not be in pain, I had to leave. But he was walled off. And Tranquility made a video about that tonight, my friend Tranquility, about how you have to take care of your partner's feelings and care how they feel, and that women are not microwaves. We need you to care about us in order for us to want to have sex with you. But you can't just be, and in bed he just treated me like an object because he was so walled off. He couldn't even show affection in bed. And a month before I left him, when I told him I loved him in bed, he got very angry with me and said, why are you saying that? Where earlier he had been rubbing my feet. So he had walled off. That's what I'm telling you guys. That walled off stuff. The only thing that would really make him very emotional and cry was if I was saying something about the kids. And he loved the kids and he loved me. He showed his love by doing things for me. He couldn't feel anything. He didn't even know what he felt. And if you're a person, you don't know what you feel, you're afraid of your feelings. You may have also grown up in a home where feelings were not modeled, or you were punished for having them, or somehow to protect yourself as a child. And it's actually very sad that, because he is a very sensitive person, but he doesn't know it. It's sad, but I can't live with someone like that. In fact, I even stopped talking to my sister and my brother last year because I was the one everyone always came to, because now I'm about, what kind of people do I want to have around me? You can't be around me just because, you were my sister or my brother or my parent or my husband. I want to have authentic, honest relationships. And people who don't want that, who want to vomit on me or hate me or are resentful of me, it's not my job to compensate for the fact that you haven't done work on yourself. I've done a lot of work on myself, not through therapy, but through coaches. I've probably spent $40,000 on coaches, and I did a lot of work on myself. And I still do. I read the comments you guys leave, and I'm like, oh, I gotta soften up here, gotta soften up there. I'm constantly still seeing some of my shortcomings. That's what I want to do. And I want to be around people who also do that work. All of my girlfriends do this kind of work. And so yeah, that's why it was very disappointing to have sex with a guy who's emotionally walled off. And there are many men like that, and women too, but right now I'm speaking of men. Women usually will not speak up. They will be silently resentful, the good wife, but the good wife isn't good. She is deep down resentful. If you're not having sex in your relationship, I'm going to quote Tranquility on this. She's right. There's something wrong. And a lot of people are not talking about it. I talk to my clients. You're not having sex with your wife? Yeah, I don't know. I'm like, just go to her and tell her, I miss how it used to be. Do you miss that too? People have got to start talking about things, not in an accusing way, and that's what I was doing at the end of my marriage. So I'm proud of myself for having tried this. Hey, why don't you like to kiss? I would say, why don't you like to kiss? And he didn't know. He didn't know. Like, it was just an exercise in frustration. I couldn't figure it out. And I kept thinking, if I can just figure out the right thing to say, I can get through to him. And I gave up. He's remarried, and I'm glad he's remarried because his life got better too. He found someone who has more in common with him and who isn't constantly making him feel like he fell short because he's walled off. Because she's happy with him the way he is. She said he's the best man I ever met. And if you don't care about the walled off part, yes, I would have to agree. So there's someone for everyone. Never forget, there's someone for everyone. I'm going to leave you with that. There's someone for everyone. But I also want to say, before you divorce, do everything in your power to be the person who changed and leaned in, because when I started changing the end of our marriage, he became a lot more affectionate with me. But he was still walled off. So when one person changes, it changes the dynamics. The other person will change. But if you want a different kind of relationship and your partner doesn't, you may have to leave. Another thing, if one person wants to go to therapy and the other person says no, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. If there's no sex happening, or one person is refusing therapy or refusing connection, is a walled off person. That's a grandiose person, because the person in a one down or healthy self-esteem position will want to work on things. They see a problem, they're like, we got to work on this. But you have a walled off person saying, no, I don't need this, everything's fine, I'm not going to read your books, I don't want to go to that class, I don't want to go to therapy. That's a lot of what I was encountering. And I thought it was okay, or I had to learn how to live with it, or figure out how to get through to him. It never even occurred to me to leave him until the night that I did. Never even occurred to me. I was in it for the long haul. So that's the damage that you can do. And he, that's all I can say. And now I'm in a different phase of my life, and I got to stretch all new muscles, all new muscles. In fact, I look better, happier, and younger now because I no longer have someone telling me no and keeping me small. I can grow and prosper, and I can be the sexual woman, spiritual sexual woman I always wanted to be that I couldn't with him. Um, so that's it. So I hope you guys might want to read my book, What I Did for Sex. It's available on Amazon. I'm going to put the link to my website in the description so you guys can check it out. And thanks for watching my video. And thanks for your question. Why'd you leave your husband if he was so great? And in those videos where I talk about how he's so great, I do talk about, when I talk about how walled off he is or why I left him, I always start with how great he was, because most women who leave their husbands do so because he was a cheater, an alcoholic, a rager, an abuser, a financial jerk, all those issues. And I had none of that. I had none of that. So, but the way he treated me was not okay anymore. And I left him to be more and to feel more. And when he kept pushing me away, there came a day when I just didn't want him anymore. Like Tranquility talked about in her video. You keep ignoring your partner, one day they'll be gone. I didn't just leave, but I mean, they won't want you anymore. And that's what happened. And I asked the counselor, I was like, I loved him so much. I wanted him so much. And then that last thing he said to me, I didn't want him at all. What happened? And she said, it's like a rug that frays. You keep ignoring your partner. And every time you ignore them or push them away, you're fraying the rug. And then that one last thing, and the rug is frayed. It's done. And that made a lot of sense. By the way, I didn't even really fall in love with him until after the kids were grown. I was like, this whole passion developed. And that's another thing. You guys think, why would a man want an older woman? If a guy wants hot sex, he's going to go for an older woman. He's not going to look for a 25 or 30-year-old if he wants hot sex. Because where our libido grows, we're more sensual, we like our bodies, we are more confident, we can ask for what we want. We're just better in bed. Everyone knows that. If you want good sex, you want to go for a woman over 40. You don't want to go for some 25-year-old who doesn't even know what she likes yet. She's still insecure. But don't worry, if you're with a younger woman, she will grow into her sexuality. We are not fixed at 25. And I wasn't done with my sexuality. I hadn't had it in my whole marriage, and I wanted to feel it. That's how I started hooking up with all these guys, and I was shocked they were ghosting me. Like, what kind of behavior is this? Very unbecoming. But anyway, it's all in my book. I have to go eat my dinner now. Thank you for watching my video.